Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to Signum Academy's Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone Camp. Can you believe it? This is our 8th session already. We are getting close to done, aren't we? But I hope you guys have been enjoying this as much as I have. Let me share my screen with you. Get the right set of slides here. There we go. Now, remember where we left off yesterday. Harry had been looking in the mirror of Erised, hadn't he? He'd seen his family for the first time that he can remember. And he gets kind of obsessed about that, doesn't he? It's new to him. It's different. He loves it, but he can't let go. And we talked a lot about the difference between living in dreams and living in the present, living in reality. Now, it's good to have dreams. It's wonderful to have dreams. But we can't let our dreams be all in all. We have to live in the present too. And now Harry, he's getting thrown right back into the present again. Dumbledore has told him that the mirror is being moved. He won't be able to use it again. Don't go looking for it, Dumbledore says. And let's face it, with all that's going to happen to Harry coming up, he's not going to have time to go looking for that mirror. Because in the 2 chapters that we're going to be talking about today, we have some real breakthroughs in the story. Well, at least one real breakthrough and one event that, well, we'll see, right? Hagrid gets a new pet. So just a quick reminder, we've been talking about interpretations and misinterpretations, and those are going to play in really big for us in the next couple of days. We've been talking about appearance versus reality. We've been talking about JK Rowling's writing style, her description, her vividness, her wordplay. We've been talking about why Dumbledore doesn't just come and rescue Harry. Look at everything Harry's learning by having to work out his problems. He's really growing by experiencing some of the things that he is. If Dumbledore were to come to the rescue all the time, he wouldn't be learning these very important lessons. Okay, and we've been talking about how Harry becomes Harry. After all the things he's experienced, why is he the person that he is? Now, we're going to be continuing to talk about this today, especially in some of these slides that we're going to talk about. So our presentation today is called Flamel and Fire, because the things we're talking about, Flamel, of course, we're going to talk about him, and Fire, Hagrid's new pet. Okay, as always, you can type into the question box if you want to ask a question or make a comment. That's always available to you, so please don't hesitate to do that. All right, so Harry, as we start chapter 13, he's got all kinds of problems, doesn't he? He's having nightmares, first of all. He's seen his parents, and now he can't get that out of his mind. And he's combining what he saw in the mirror with that old dream that he had, that old memory about that flash of green light. So he sees his parents disappearing in a flash of green light. What a horrible dream, huh? That's telling us something that Harry's afraid of, that he's going to lose people like he lost his parents. Okay, they still can't find out who Flamel is. Remember how much they've been looking in all those books in the library? No luck. And now he's got the added problem of Quidditch practice in the pouring rain. And at the latest Quidditch practice, Wood has some very bad news. Let's see what it is. Then, during one particularly wet and muddy practice session, Wood gave the team a bit of bad news. He just got very angry with the Weasleys, who kept dive-bombing each other and pretending to fall off their brooms. "Will you stop messing around?" he yelled. "That's exactly the sort of thing that'll lose us the match. Snape's refereeing this time, and he'll be looking for any excuse to knock points off Gryffindor. What? Snape refereeing a Quidditch match? Have we even ever seen Snape on a broomstick? Do we have any indication about him caring much about Quidditch at all? Except, of course, rubbing Professor McGonagall's nose in the fact that Gryffindor lost. Okay, we don't, right? So this is a huge surprise to Harry and to everybody else, but especially to Harry. Remember what George Weasley does? He's been pretending to fall off his broom. Well, now he really does fall off his broom right in the mud. Okay, so Snape's going to referee the match. Now, Harry thinks he knows why. Remember, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, they've made an interpretation. They've seen some evidence. They've heard some things. They think Snape is out to get Harry and out to get whatever that dog, that three-headed dog, is guarding. Okay, so Harry thinks Snape is going to referee that match in order to get him. So he's pretty nervous. Hermione says, just don't play. Pretend you're sick. Pretend you break a leg. Ron says, really do break a leg. Well, that might be a little extreme, right? And Harry says, no, he's going to play. No matter what, Gryffindor needs him. There is no reserve seeker. If he doesn't play, Gryffindor doesn't have a shot. What do you think? Is that some Gryffindor courage coming in there? He's pretty sure he knows what's going to happen, that Snape's going to try to curse him again. But he's going to play anyway because Gryffindor needs him. Harry's not used to being needed, is he? The Dursleys never really needed Harry. They made him work a lot, but they never needed him. They never showed him that he was wanted. But now he's needed, and he steps up. No matter what the risk, he feels it's important enough for him to play Quidditch. And they're discussing this, the three of them, when all of a sudden, Neville comes falling into the Gryffindor common room. And he's had a leg locker curse put on him by Malfoy. Can you imagine poor Neville? This was right outside the library, right? So it's a long ways from Gryffindor Tower. Can you imagine poor Neville bunny hopping all the way to the tower with his legs locked together? He falls through the portrait hole. Everybody bursts out laughing except Hermione. She jumps up and performs the counter curse. But Neville, he's feeling pretty bad. Hermione urges him to report Malfoy to Professor McGonagall. Neville doesn't really want to do that. He thinks it would just make more problems. Ron gives some other advice. You've got to stand up to him, Neville, said Ron. He's used to walking all over people. But that's no reason to lie down in front of him and make it easier. There's no need to tell me I'm not brave enough to be in Gryffindor. Malfoy's already done that, Neville choked. You're worth 12 of Malfoy, Harry said. The Sorting Hat chose you for Gryffindor, didn't it? Indeed it did. Look at the different ways that the students respond to bullying, because that's what Malfoy's doing, right? He's bullying Neville. He is making life miserable for Neville, and Neville has done nothing at all to deserve it. Hermione says, report it to Professor McGonagall. Now that's actually a pretty good idea. That's usually one of the first things you should do if you're being bullied by somebody. Report it to an adult. Tell your mom or dad, in this case, tell a teacher. Okay, let somebody else know what's going on. You shouldn't handle it all by yourself. But I bet sometimes we feel a little bit like Neville, don't we? We don't want to tell. We don't want to make things worse. We don't want to be tattletales. Remember that? I remember when I was in elementary school and junior high. Oh, you can't be a tattletale. You can't tell on somebody else. But if somebody else is hurting you, that's the time you do tell. Because really, only an adult can really help at that point. So let somebody know what's going on. Neville doesn't make the right choice there. He should have told Professor McGonagall. That's very important. Now, Ron, he says stand up to him. Sometimes that works too. Sometimes when you stand up to a bully, they'll back down because they're really cowards, right? They have to pick on somebody else to make themselves feel better. And sometimes when you stand up and say, hey, I'm not going to take that, they'll back off. Okay, Neville, he's not real anxious to do that either. I can't say I blame him. Remember, he's just bunny hopped all the way to Gryffindor Tower. Poor kid. Now, Harry, he offers something else. He offers comfort. Hermione and Ron both give Harry some advice. Or excuse me, Neville rather, some advice. Harry, he offers some good, solid comfort. You're worth 12 of Malfoy, Neville. Remember, the Sorting Hat put you in Gryffindor. You're good. You are a good person. You are valuable. And don't let Malfoy tell you otherwise. We should be doing that too. When we see somebody getting picked on, we should go up to that person and say, hey, you know what? That's not you. It's not your problem. It's the bully's problem. You are valuable. You are worth something. And remember what else Harry gives to Neville? He gives him a chocolate frog, his last one from Christmas. Now, he didn't have to do that, did he? But he wants Neville to feel better. So he gives Neville that chocolate frog. And Neville gratefully accepts it, opens the package and says, oh, hey, Harry, by the way, you collect these chocolate frog cards, right? Here you go. And Harry looks at it, and it's Dumbledore, the first one he ever got. He turns it over and voila, finally, Flamel. He gasped. He stared at the back of the card. Then he looked up at Ron and Hermione. I found him, he whispered. I found Flamel. I told you I'd read the name somewhere before. I read it on the train coming here. Listen to this. Professor Dumbledore is particularly famous for his defeat of the dark wizard Grindelwald in 1945, for the discovery of the 12 uses of dragon's blood, and his work on alchemy with his partner Nicholas Flamel. See how Rowling constructs this story? She gave us a hint at the very beginning of the book, or almost the very beginning. When Harry's on the train to Hogwarts, we don't know what's going to happen. She does, and she gives us a hint. She drops a little piece of information, a little clue, a little detail along the way. And then later on, that little detail becomes incredibly important. Did you remember? Did you remember where Harry had heard Nicholas Flamel? Or did it slide right by you? Yep, somebody remembered. Very good. Very good. I have to admit, first time I read the book, slid right by. I didn't remember where Nicholas Flamel came up. Okay, so good catch if you caught it. Now Hermione, as usual, with that little piece of information, is ready to find out more. And she knows exactly where to look now. She dashes up to her dormitory and comes back with this huge book that she had checked out at the library a while back for a little light reading at bedtime. Ron says, yeah, light reading. Sure. And she finds the passage that explains Flamel, the Sorcerer's Stone. Okay, and the ancient study of alchemy is concerned with making the Sorcerer's Stone, a legendary substance with astonishing powers. The stone will transform any metal into pure gold. It also produces the elixir of life, which will make the drinker immortal. There have been many reports of the Sorcerer's Stone over the centuries, but the only stone currently in existence belongs to Mr. Nicholas Flamel, the noted alchemist and opera lover. Mr. Flamel, who celebrated his 665th birthday last year, enjoys a quiet life in Devon with his wife, Perenelle, 658. Finally, Nicholas Flamel. Okay, the irony of this. What do you wonder? Somebody says, I wonder. Type in a little bit more. What is it you wonder? Okay, the irony of this. Okay, irony, that's a state of affairs different than we would expect. Okay, when something is ironic, it turns out differently than we were expecting it to happen. We would have expected Ron and Harry and Hermione to come up with Nicholas Flamel in a library book, that they would finally find the right book after their whole big search. But nope, it's on the back of a chocolate card frog, a throwaway item to many people. That's where they get their information. It's been right in their dorm room the whole time. Think about that. They've been scouring the library for weeks, and the information has been right under their noses. Okay, now here's a tip. Did you know this? Nicholas Flamel was a real person. Yeah, he was right. He was real. His wife was too. He was born about 1340, and he lived in Paris, France. He was a scribe, somebody who wrote for other people. Remember, not everybody could read and write in those days. So he would write documents for people. They would hire him to do that. So he was a scribe. And he was a bookseller in Paris. And some people say that he was also an alchemist and that he really did make a sorcerer's stone. Now remember, Sorcerer's Stone, that got changed for the book here, for the American edition. It's really called the Philosopher's Stone. Remember, I told you at the very beginning of class that the American publishers wanted to change the title so that it wouldn't have the word philosopher in it. They didn't know if any Americans would be interested in buying a book about philosophers. Well, anyway. Oh, somebody wonders how old Dumbledore is. Ooh, now that's a good question. I'm going to have to look that up. I don't know right offhand. I'm pretty sure he's probably over 100. But let me look that up for you, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. He's not as old as Nicholas Flamel, though, that's for sure. Okay, so some people say Nicholas Flamel was really an alchemist and that he really made a philosopher's stone, or as we're calling it in this book, a sorcerer's stone. Now, supposedly, he died on March 22nd, 1418 in Paris, but legend said that he never really died, that his tomb is empty, that he really did make a sorcerer's stone or a philosopher's stone, and that he used it to make the elixir of life, making the drinker immortal, not dying. Okay, what do you think? How long since Dumbledore has shaved? I would say a pretty good long time, because he has a really long beard, doesn't he? I'd say it's probably been years since Dumbledore shaved. All right, so now we've got some important information here. We found out who Nicholas Flamel is. We found out what he was famous for, making the Sorcerer's Stone, an object that will turn metal into gold and make the elixir of life that makes the drinker immortal. Now, my goodness, there's a lot of people out there who would want that. As much money as you could use and living forever, not dying. Sounds pretty good on the surface. We'll hear Dumbledore have something to say about that a little bit later. Okay, but now we know what Fluffy is guarding. Ron and Harry and Hermione realize that. Okay, now this time they make an interpretation off of the evidence that they have. They know who Nicholas Flamel is. They know what he's famous for. They know what he made. And according to Hagrid, that dog, what he's guarding is between Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel. Well, we can draw a pretty safe interpretation, pretty safe conclusion there, that Fluffy is standing on top of a trapdoor, beneath which, somewhere, is that Sorcerer's Stone. Okay, pretty good, huh? See how JK Rowling does that so nicely? By the way, a lot of people in the Middle Ages believed that alchemy was real as well. They thought that maybe somebody could make a philosopher's stone that would turn metal into gold and make the elixir of life. And like I said, people thought Nicholas Flamel really did. It's one of those mysteries. But now they know some more pieces of the puzzle. But Harry has something else to think about. The Quidditch match, refereed by none other than Professor Snape. And everybody's worried. Ron and Hermione, they even start practicing the leg locker curse, just in case. And then Harry finds out that Dumbledore himself is coming to watch the game. And he starts feeling better because he doesn't think that anybody's going to try to hurt him with Dumbledore watching. And that's a pretty safe conclusion too. We know how powerful Dumbledore is as a wizard. We've been told that. And Harry knows that too. And he thinks, okay, he's going to protect me. I'm feeling better. But Ron and Hermione don't know that yet. Harry finds out in the changing room before the game that Dumbledore is sitting out there. Ron and Hermione don't know. Okay, so they're on the edge of their seats. They're nervous. They're scared. And Malfoy shows up, and he starts making cracks at Ron about his family. Okay, and about them being poor. And that's a sore spot for Ron. It really is. Remember when he was back on the train a while back, and he was so embarrassed of all his hand-me-downs, and he had these dry corned beef sandwiches he didn't like, and he didn't have money to buy things off the trolley. So that's a really sore spot for Ron. And Malfoy, he goes one step too far. You're in luck, Weasley. Potter's obviously spotted some money on the ground, said Malfoy, as Harry makes a dive. Ron snapped. Before Malfoy knew what was happening, Ron was on top of him, wrestling him to the ground. Neville hesitated, then clambered over the back of his seat to help. Okay, Ron's nerves get the best of him, don't they? So he takes his own advice that he gave to Neville just a little while ago, and he decides to stand up to Malfoy. He's been standing up to him verbally with words for a while. Now he decides to add his fists. Now, what do you think, though? Is this going to accomplish anything? Is this going to make anything different with Malfoy? Ron fighting him, Neville fighting him? What do you think? Nope. And I think you're right. A lot of times that doesn't help much, does it? I think it just gets people kind of angrier when they start physically beating on each other. Okay? So remember, like we talked about, best thing to do, you can stand up to a bully. You can stand up with your words and you can tell him, this isn't right, I'm not taking it. You can comfort your friends, and you should do that when they're being bullied. But you also need to go to somebody in charge, an adult, a parent, a teacher. Let them know what's going on. Okay, but Ron, he's got a temper, doesn't he? Over the back of his bench he goes, and they're whirling around down there fighting. And in the meantime, Harry sees something. He sees the snitch. And he goes flying past Snape, just about hitting him, just missing him, and catches the snitch in record time. Okay, and he's proud. Harry has claimed victory on purpose this time. Remember what happened the last time? He almost swallowed the snitch. This time, he sees it, he catches it on purpose. He does the seeker's job, and he does it well. And later on, he reflects on his victory. What happened there? There we go. Harry thinks about what his victory is. Harry left the changing room alone sometime later to take his Nimbus 2000 back to the broom shed. He couldn't ever remember feeling happier. He'd really done something to be proud of now. No one can say he was just a famous name anymore. The evening air had never smelled so sweet. He walked over the damp grass, reliving the last hour in his head, which was a happy blur. Gryffindors running to lift him onto their shoulders, Ron and Hermione in the distance, jumping up and down, Ron cheering through a heavy nosebleed. Okay, so this is real victory for Harry. Yup, he caught the snitch. But it's not even that. It's not even so much that Harry won the game for Gryffindor. That's important. But look at what he says. He's done something to be proud of. No one could say he was just a famous name anymore. He'd made an effort to do something and to do something really well. He was satisfied with his performance. He felt like he had put in the effort to learn how to play Quidditch, and now he was doing it really well. And that's probably one of the biggest victories that you could have. When you have success because it's been taking a lot of effort and you've worked really hard. That's victory, isn't it? Have you ever had that? Where you've worked really, really hard at something and it goes really well and you're just pleased. You're so happy. Not because maybe you won the game or got a good score on a test or a contest, but because you worked hard and you accomplished something you really wanted to do. That's what real victory is. Okay, remember Harry had been worried before. He had told Hagrid that he was famous for something he couldn't even remember. And now he's going to be famous for something he's done. Okay, but Harry quickly gets distracted from this sense of victory. He sees a hooded figure heading for the forest, the Forbidden Forest. Remember that? And it's Snape. And Harry's curiosity gets the best of him. And he follows. He gets on his broomstick and he flies into the forest. Should he have done that? Well, number one, he's breaking the rule, not going into the forest. Kids aren't supposed to be in there. Number two, he's following a teacher. Yes, it's a teacher. He expects or suspects of doing something. And he's eavesdropping on a conversation. He overhears a conversation between Snape and Quirrell in the Forbidden Forest as he's sitting on a tree branch. And Snape says, "Have you found out how to get past that beast of Hagrid's yet? But Severus, you don't want me as your enemy, Quirrell," said Snape, taking a step toward him. I don't know what you know perfectly well what I mean." Harry also overhears Snape mention your little bit of hocus pocus and threaten to have another chat with Quirrell very soon. He also says to Quirrell that he's going to give him some time to think things over and decide where his loyalties lie. Now, Harry, he thinks he knows what all this means, right? He's already decided something about Snape. He's decided that Snape is trying to steal the Sorcerer's Stone. That he's out to get it. Now, probably the stone has more protections than just Fluffy. because the teachers are pretty smart, right? They're not going to leave that stone unprotected. Okay, so Harry thinks Snape's out to get the stone, and now he thinks Quirrell's resisting him. Quirrell's fighting against him. So Harry's interpreting again. He's forming a judgment from what he sees and hears, what he thinks he knows. But is it right? We're going to find out. There are other possible interpretations that Harry maybe misses. Somebody says, no, he's not right. No, he's not. Okay, he forgets that things aren't always as they seem in the wizarding world. Appearance and reality are very different. So he's got these snatches of conversation, and he is trying to figure out what's going on here. Maybe he doesn't get it quite right. Okay, keep this in mind. So that's where our chapter 13 ends. We end with Harry looking out, listening to Snape, listening to Quirrell. He goes back, he tells Ron and Hermione about what he's overheard, and those three are positive they know what's going on. Okay, let's look at your journal question for this chapter, chapter 13. What do you think? Is the Sorcerer's Stone a good magical device or a bad one? And why? Remember what the Sorcerer's Stone does. It gives people pretty much as much money as they want because you can take any metal and turn it into gold. And it creates the elixir of life, which gives people immortality. They don't die. Is that good or is that bad? Something to write about in your journal. Put yourself in the story. If you had the Sorcerer's Stone, would you consider it a benefit or not? Oh, okay. Yeah, I see. Somebody typed in something by accident. You know what? I do that too sometimes, so don't feel bad. If you don't have your mouse in just the right spot, right? Okay, so think about that. Sorcerer's Stone. Good, bad, somewhere in between. Can an object in itself be good or bad? Or is it how it's used? It's another thing to think about. Good, bad, or somewhere in between. Write about it in your journal. See what you think. Play with that question. Because that applies to a lot of things around us sometimes. All right, so the kids now have a limited time to consider what to do about this little problem of Snape going after the Sorcerer's Stone, so they think. Okay, they try to encourage Quirrell to keep up his courage to resist Snape, not tell his little bit of hocus pocus, whatever that means, the little something he's contributed perhaps to protecting the stone. But they have to study. Hermione's panicking. 10 weeks until exams. Now that sounds like a long time, doesn't it? That's over 2 months, 2.5 months. But not to Hermione. Nope. She wants to study. She thinks she should have started ages ago. And the teachers are agreeing with her. They are piling on the homework. So the kids are spending a lot of time in the library studying. A lot. But they see something strange one day when they're in the library. Do you remember what that was? What very peculiar thing did they see in the library one day? Or should I say, peculiar person they saw in the library one day? Okay, somebody who's not normally there. You know? I'll tell you. It's Hagrid. No, not Neville in a cloak. Sorry, not right. Hagrid. Hagrid was in the library one day. Now, what's Hagrid doing in the library, right? Well, they talk to him. They tell him, well, we know what the dog is guarding. And he shushes them, of course. Don't be talking about it in here. Students aren't supposed to know about that. And they're so curious that Ron gets up after Hagrid leaves, and he goes over to the section that Hagrid was looking in to see what Hagrid was looking at. What kind of books are in this section? And he finds out it's a section about dragons. Dragons, he whispered. Hagrid was looking up stuff about dragons. Look at these. Dragon species of Great Britain and Ireland, From Egg to Inferno, a Dragon Keeper's Guide. Harry explains that Hagrid has admitted he's always wanted a dragon. But Ron says, but it's against our laws, said Ron. Dragon breeding was outlawed by the Warlocks Convention of 1709. Everyone knows that. It's hard to stop muggles noticing us if we're keeping dragons in the back garden. Anyway, you can't tame dragons. It's dangerous. Yeah, uh-oh, I agree. Uh-oh. If Hagrid's looking up books about dragons, we're in trouble. Okay, Ron explains that there are dragons in Britain. Harry has trouble believing it, but there's the common Welsh green and the Hebridean black. So at least 2 dragon species in England. And it's awfully hard to stop muggles noticing those sometimes. Notice how much Ron knows about things he wants to know about. You ever encounter that yourself? If you're really, really interested in something, you know everything about it, even if you kind of turn your brain off about other subjects. Well, that's what Ron does. He even knows the year of the Warlocks Convention that outlawed dragon breeding. So yes, he can do better at his homework if he really, really wanted to. So we're left wondering, what is Hagrid up to now? So the 3 friends, they go to visit Hagrid later. They want to talk about the stone. They want to learn what's protecting it. And they also want to find out, what is Hagrid up to? Now, of course, he doesn't want to tell. Not about the stone, not about its protections. And Hermione decides she's going to use a little flattery. So she says, oh, come on, Hagrid. You might not want to tell us, but you do know. You know everything that goes on around here, said Hermione in a warm, flattering voice. Hagrid's beard twitched, and they could tell he was smiling. We only wondered who had done the guarding, really, Hermione went on. We wondered who Dumbledore had trusted enough to help him, apart from you. Now, is that being fair? Hagrid is easily flattered, isn't he? He likes to hear good things about himself. And remember how proud he is of doing important jobs for Dumbledore. He said that to Harry almost right away at the beginning. This was an important job, and Dumbledore let him do it. So he's thinking, oh yeah, I get to do all kinds of things important around Hogwarts and help Dumbledore. And then pretty soon, he wants to talk a little more. Hermione's played on his pride, hasn't she? He's proud of his job. He's proud of helping, and now he wants to talk about it. All these important things. And Hermione uses that to her advantage. So Hagrid, he lists off the protectors. Sprout, Flitwick, McGonagall, Quirrell, Dumbledore, Snape. They've all contributed a little piece of magic to keep the stones safe. Okay, so now they know that much. And Harry has one more question for Hagrid. Nobody but Hagrid and Dumbledore know how to get past Fluffy, right? And Hagrid assures them it's a secret. He hasn't told anybody but Dumbledore how to get past Fluffy. Then Harry notices something else. It is very hot in Hagrid's cabin. And he asks if they can open a window, and Hagrid says, nope, sorry, Harry, can't do it. Harry looks over at the fire, and he sees something, a huge black egg. Hagrid had wanted at cards the night before, playing cards down in the village. And Hermione, of course, by this time is panicking a little bit, as are Ron and Harry, and she asks him, well, What are you going to do with this thing when it hatches, Hagrid? Obviously, Hagrid hadn't thought too much about having a dragon other than, hey, it's really cool to have a dragon. I've got this egg. Awesome. That's about as far as he's gotten. He's looked up some information in books, though. Well, I've been doing some reading, said Hagrid, pulling a large book from under his pillow. Got this out of the library. Dragon breeding for pleasure and profit. It's a bit out of date, of course, but it's all in here. Keep the egg in the fire, 'cause their mothers breathe on them, see? And when it hatches, feed it on a bucket of brandy, mixed with chicken blood, every half hour. And see here, how to recognize different eggs? What I got there, a Norwegian ridgeback. They're rare, them. Oh, Hagrid's so proud of himself, isn't he? He's got a dragon. He's very pleased. He knows how to take care of this egg. Very nice. Yeah, he's in trouble. I agree. Because the next thing Hermione says, but Hagrid, you live in a wooden house. He forgot something. Dragons breathe fire. Okay, so yeah, Hagrid is in a little bit of a hot situation, isn't he? Both literally and figuratively. Now, Hagrid knows about the law. He knows it's not legal to have a dragon. He knows why that book he's looking at is a little out of date, but he's choosing to ignore the law. Why do you think he does that? The law is pretty reasonable. Like Ron says, it's pretty hard to keep muggles from noticing us if we've got dragons in our backyards. Why do you think Hagrid ignores the law? Any ideas? What's he thinking? He's got an illegal dragon egg. It's about to hatch in a wooden house. What do you think? Yeah, he thinks it's not a big deal. True. And he also really, really wants a dragon. He's wanted a dragon since he's been a kid. He told Harry almost right away when they met. Later at the Triwizard Challenge, well, we'll discuss that in another book someday, perhaps. Okay, but Hagrid, he thinks he can handle this. He is the gameskeeper, actually, after all. He's used to dealing with all kinds of creatures. He's sure he can handle this dragon. He's sure he can make it work. He's just going to kind of push the law off in another direction for a while and enjoy having a dragon like he's always wanted. Hagrid, maybe not a good idea. In fact, it turns out to be a pretty bad idea. Okay, so let's see what happens. This dragon egg is about ready to hatch. And the three friends go down to Hagrid's to see it happen. Okay, and pretty soon they get to see the baby dragon. All at once, there was a scraping noise, and the egg split open. The baby dragon flopped onto the table. It wasn't exactly pretty. Harry thought it looked like a crumpled black umbrella. Its spiny wings were huge compared to its skinny jet body, and it had a long snout with wide nostrils, stubs of horns, and bulging orange eyes. It sneezed. A couple of sparks flew out of its snout. Once again, we say JK Rowling, painting a picture with her words. We can see this baby dragon, can't we? He looks like a crumpled black umbrella. Most of us have seen umbrellas that haven't been folded upright, and they're all kind of crumpled and floppy. So we can picture what this little dragon looks like. It's got spiny wings, so we can picture they're kind of sharp and pokey, and a skinny jet body. And jet here, that doesn't mean like the airplane kind of jet. That's another word for black, like a shiny black. And a long snout with wide nostrils, stubs of horns, so just little bitty horns growing, and bulging, big outstanding orange eyes. And Hagrid, he thinks it's beautiful. And he thinks it's mommy. So he says, oh, look, he knows his mommy, when the baby dragon bites his fingers. Hagrid isn't quite in touch with reality here, is he? Okay, Hermione tries to bring him back with a question about, Hagrid, how fast do dragons grow anyway? But then Hagrid sees something that makes them all very nervous. Someone was looking through the gap in the curtains. It's a kid. He's running back up to the school. Harry bolted to the door and looked out. Even at a distance, there was no mistaking him. Malfoy had seen the dragon. Uh-oh. Hagrid's in trouble now, isn't he? Malfoy, remember, had overheard something of Ron and Harry and Hermione talking about Hagrid and something going on. He didn't know what, but he was bound and determined he was going to find out. And he does. And now he's got something that he's going to hold over their heads. Okay, he knows something. And he can use that knowledge anytime he wants to. All he has to do is tell. And that smile is lurking on Malfoy's face. And it's making Harry and Ron and Hermione very, very nervous. And they know they have to do something about Hagrid and this dragon. Hagrid doesn't really want to cooperate. He thinks he's this dragon's mommy. Remember how much Hagrid loves creatures, except they're usually creatures that seem to the rest of us like monsters. Okay, and he argues he can't just dump Norbert. That's what he's named him, Norbert. He can't just dump him. He's too little. He'd die. He's just a baby. So Harry has a brainstorm. He thinks of something important. Charlie Weasley, Ron's brother. He works with dragons in Romania. Maybe if they wrote Charlie a letter, maybe he could think of something to do. Maybe they could send Norbert to him somehow, put him back in the wild where he belongs, so he doesn't burn down Hagrid's wooden house. So they write a letter to Charlie, and pretty soon they get his reply. I'd be glad to take the Norwegian Ridgeback, but it won't be easy getting him here. I think the best thing will be to send him over with some friends of mine who are coming to visit me next week. Trouble is, they mustn't be seen carrying an illegal dragon. Could you get the Ridgeback up the tallest tower at midnight on Saturday? They can meet you there and take him away while it's still dark. Well, this isn't the perfect plan, is it? They have to get Norbert to the top of the highest tower of Hogwarts Saturday night at midnight. They're supposed to be in bed. They're carrying an illegal dragon. Luckily, they have the invisibility cloak. That might help. But there are several hitches in this plan, several rough spots here that aren't going to make this easy for them. And Hagrid, of course, he's not much help. He agrees that it has to be done, but he's really not happy about it. And then one more hitch comes up. Ron gets bitten by the dragon. And remember, Hagrid tells Ron off for scaring him? Ron's not pleased at this point. He thinks the dragon is the worst, nastiest creature he has ever met in his life. And by the next morning, though, there's really a hitch. There was a hitch. By next morning, Ron's bitten hand had swollen to twice its usual size. He didn't know whether it was safe to go to Madame Pomfrey. Would she recognize a dragon bite? By the afternoon, though, he had no choice. The cut had turned a nasty shade of green. It looked as if Norbert's fangs were poisonous. Oh dear. Now Malfoy, he knows exactly why Ron is in the hospital wing with a bandaged hand. He knows what bit him. and he goes to visit Ron. His excuse, of course, is that he just wants to borrow a book from Ron. That's what he tells Madame Pomfrey. But really, he's come to gloat. He knows how much trouble Ron and Harry and Hermione and Hagrid are in. And he also wants to hold it over Ron's head that he could tell anytime he wanted to. And Ron, he forgets something when he gives Malfoy the book Malfoy wants to borrow. Charlie's letter, it's in that book. This is one of those situations, isn't it, that it doesn't seem like anything could go worse right now. It seems like things are just about as bad as they can get. But it's too late to change the plan. There's no time to send another letter to Charlie. So they have to go ahead. They have to do it. At least they have the invisibility cloak. So it's time to say goodbye to Norbert. And Harry and Hermione, who now have this job of getting this dragon in his crate all the way up to the top of the tower, they would feel a lot sadder for Hagrid if they didn't have to do this. But Hagrid, he's miserable. He's got lots of rats and some brandy for the journey, said Hagrid in a muffled voice. And I've packed his teddy bear in case he gets lonely. From inside the crate came ripping noises that sounded to Harry as though Teddy was having his head torn off. Bye-bye, Norbert, Hagrid sobbed as Harry and Hermione covered the crate with the invisibility cloak and stepped underneath it themselves. Mummy will never forget you. Oh my, talk about appearance versus reality. Hagrid is acting like Norbert is a cuddly little bunny rabbit, as Ron said, right? And he's giving him his teddy bear for the journey. Do you think Norbert cares much about that teddy bear? No. Sounded to Harry like Teddy was having his head ripped off. Okay, so appearance versus reality. Let's face it, a dragon is a pretty nasty creature. At this point, I have to agree with Ron. Okay, why do you think Hagrid is so blind to reality? We almost feel sorry for him, don't we? Almost. But he's really kind of out of touch. He has decided he loves this baby dragon very, very much. And of course, the thing keeps biting people and him and Fang's tail and teddy bears. And Hagrid can't see beyond this tiny little creature, at least at first. That's his baby dragon. Do you ever do that? I think we all do sometimes. Maybe not quite as dramatically as Hagrid does, but sometimes we all see something or someone differently than the way it really is. Think about that in your life. Do you ever do that with anything? So it's a difficult job, isn't it? Getting Norbert's crate to the top of the tallest tower. And along the way, Harry and Hermione see Professor McGonagall catching Malfoy. And Malfoy is going on and on about Harry Potter's coming and he's got a dragon and you have to catch him. And I know this, Professor McGonagall. She doesn't believe him. For once, Malfoy's telling the truth. And Professor McGonagall isn't having any of it. And Harry and Hermione, they're pretty pleased with this. Remember, Hermione says, I can sing. And Harry says, please don't. But they gloat too soon, don't they? They get too happy too quickly. They do get Norbert to the top of the tower. Charlie's friends come and they do take Norbert away. That's a good thing. Harry and Hermione, they're not at all sad to say goodbye to Norbert. But then something else happens. They slipped back down the spiral staircase, their hearts as light as their hands, now that Norbert was off them. No more dragon. Malfoy in detention. What could spoil their happiness? The answer to that was waiting at the foot of the stairs. As they stepped into the corridor, Filch's face loomed suddenly out of the darkness. Well, 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 he whispered. We are in trouble. They'd left the invisibility cloak on top of the tower. How could they have done it? How could they have forgotten to put the invisibility cloak back on? Why do you think they did that? Go ahead and type in if you have an idea. What happened that they forgot something so important? Boy, that's a big, bad mistake, isn't it? Have you ever done anything like that? Forgotten something that you really shouldn't have? I think most of us have at one time or another. I know I have. And it all worked out well in the end, but boy, I thought, how could I be so stupid? I think Harry and Hermione, they were pretty distracted. They were really worried about Norbert, getting him off safely. They were a little happy about Malfoy. And they were so relieved when it was all over. All they could think about was getting back down to Gryffindor Tower and climbing into bed. And they weren't paying enough attention. They forgot the invisibility cloak. And we'll leave them here at the end of this chapter. Next time we'll start up with what happens to them now that they've been caught by Filch. But let's look at your journal question. Would you like to have a pet dragon? Why or why not? What do you think? Would you like to have a pet dragon? Would you be like Hagrid and think this is really cool? This is something unique and special? Or would you rather avoid those things? I know what I'd say. I wouldn't want a pet dragon. I think they're more trouble than they're worth. But what do you think? So write about that in your journal. Would you like to have a pet dragon? Okay, tomorrow we're going to talk about the Forbidden Forest. That's our next chapter, chapter 15. And we're only going to do one chapter tomorrow because there's so much in there for us to think about. So tomorrow, the Forbidden Forest. Does anybody have any questions or comments at the end of this class today about these couple of chapters or anything else we've been talking about in the Harry Potter universe? Go ahead and write them in if you do. I'm going to show you one quick picture. Hang on a minute as I change over. There's Norbert, or one artist's interpretation of Norbert, the baby dragon. Look at the spines. Look at the flappy wings, the big bulging eyes. Is that what you were picturing Norbert to look at, or do you disagree? I'll let you guys decide for yourselves. Is that what Norbert looks like to you? I actually had a little different picture of him myself. All right, any questions, concerns, comments? Okay, then we'll pick back up tomorrow with the Forbidden Forest. And remember, you can go ahead and email me questions at camp@signumu.org. And I'll be glad to answer them for you. And I'll look up how old Dumbledore is, too. We'll find that out, and we'll talk about that when we start class tomorrow. So thank you for joining us again for this session of Signum Academy's Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone Camp. And we will see all you magical people tomorrow. Bye-bye.